Hey guys, it's Sean O'Connell, the Managing Director here at CinemaBlend, and I want to give you guys a spoiler-free review of the new movie Spider-Man Far From Home. There are a lot of surprises in this movie, and I really recommend that you go see it before a lot of these things start to leak. I'm not going to put any of them into this review. This is going to be completely spoiler-free, so you can watch it early, and I can help get you excited for the new Spider-Man movie. And speaking of getting excited, make me really excited and happy by going down, hitting subscribe, and turning on your notifications so that every time we post a new video here on CinemaBlend's YouTube page, you guys will be the very first to hear about it. So let's talk about the plot of Far From Home, and I'm going to keep all of this to things that you have seen in the trailer. It is an immediate follow-up to Avengers Endgame. So again, if you haven't seen Endgame, get to a theater and see that also. Tom Holland's Peter Parker is still reeling from the death of Tony Stark, trying to figure out how he's going to move forward in this new universe, and people are kind of looking to Spider-Man to be the next Iron Man, but he clearly does not want that responsibility. All Peter wants to do is go on a European trip with his high school classmates, which include MJ, played by Zendaya, and his best friend Ned, played by Jacob Batalon. Of course, as you've seen in the trailers, Peter's European vacation gets interrupted when Nick Fury has to recruit him to fight off these creatures that are popping up all around Europe called the Elementals. These are references to previous Spider-Man villains that we know from the comic books that probably wouldn't be big enough to carry their own movie. We see a version of Molten Man attacking Spider-Man in Vienna. We see a version of Hydro Man, which is like a B-level type Spider-Man villain. He shows up in Venice. So anyway, Nick Fury is trying to figure out where these elementals are coming from and needs Spider-Man's help. Now, in addition to recruiting Spider-Man for this new team, he also recruits Jake Gyllenhaal's character Mysterio, and we're told in the trailers that Mysterio comes from the multiverse, another version of Earth that exists completely separate to us. It's a term that is really familiar to people who read Marvel Comics, but might be brand new to the MCU, and so we hope that the new movie is going to explain a little bit more about the multiverse and where Mysterio comes from. It is difficult to talk about this movie without touching on some of the spoilers, but I think I can tell you everything that I liked about it while still keeping it pretty general. I want to start with Tom Holland, who clearly is the best Spider-Man that we've seen on screen. He brings this sort of innocence to Peter Parker. He still looks like that high school-aged kid who has the weight of the world on his shoulders, a ton of responsibility because of his heroic powers, but he just wants to sort of put them on the shelf, especially after the events of Infinity War and Endgame, and get closer to this girl who he has a crush on. And I think anyone who's gone through high school can identify with that. But of course, Peter's always pulled back into the action because of his powers and because of his responsibilities, and Nick Fury pours that on Tom Holland a lot more. I kind of felt like in Infinity War and Endgame, because I'm such a rabid Spider-Man fan, and if you can't tell by my shirt, like I am a die-hard Spider-Man fan, that I wanted to see a lot more with this character. So Far From Home just gave me a concentrated blast of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and I love Tom Holland in the role. I also really liked Mysterio a lot as a character. I was really intrigued to see how they were going to translate him from the comic books to the big screen. Mysterio essentially is a master of illusion, and he uses these different tricks to bring these elaborate effects to life. And so teaming him up with Spider-Man I thought was a really intriguing way to introduce the character to the MCU, and casting Jake Gyllenhaal ended up being perfect. Gyllenhaal's a fantastic actor, but we've seen him sort of get lost in big-ticket blockbuster films before, like Prince of Persia, where he can't really bring his personality to it. Spider-Man Far From Home allows Jake Gyllenhaal to truly be everything that we love about Jake Gyllenhaal, and I think he's a really fascinating character. And I want to celebrate the Elementals, because when I saw them in the trailers, I kind of thought it was strange that they were being included, because they're meant to represent villains from the Spider-Man comics that we just didn't think we'd see on the big screen before. Hydro Man, Molten Man, they're just not big enough to really carry their own Spider-Man movie, but when they figured out a way how to use them in Far From Home, it was really fun to see not just them in action, but how Spider-Man was going to figure out how to bring them down. That was one of the fun parts of when he would face off against someone like Hydro Man in the comics, is you were like, how are Spider-Man's powers going to take down this guy who's completely made of water and can control water? Well, Far From Home really takes that conversation one step further and watches us see a live-action Spider-Man try to take down the Elementals, and I thought that ended up being a really cool part of this film. But I know what you guys want to know. What is the star rating for Spider-Man Far From Home? And here's where it gets complicated, because there are a few lingering things that are still in the back of my mind until I'm able to see it again. And of course, I can't tell you what they are because they're deeply related to the plot and they would get into spoiler territory. For that reason, I am between a 4 and a 4.5. And I think a second viewing might clear up some of the things that I have issues with. So for now, because of the reasons why I really do love this movie, I'm going to give it a 4.5. Everybody immediately is asking me, is it better than Homecoming? And I'm going to say that it's right in line with Homecoming. There are things in Homecoming that I really like a little bit more than how they work in Far From Home, but then there are some things in Far From Home that I really like better than how they handle in Homecoming. Essentially, the character beats in Homecoming are probably stronger, but the action beats in Far From Home are stronger than what we saw in Homecoming. Whenever people ask me what my favorite Spider-Man movie of all time is, my answer has been Homecoming. I really think that Tom Holland is the perfect Peter Parker, and I have big issues with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies that we can get into in a totally different video. I do love Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. That gets brought up a lot also, but that's more of a Miles Morales story, and Miles was never necessarily my Spider-Man. I like Peter Parker a lot. I'm a big fan of Peter Parker, so I do gravitate toward the live-action Homecoming and Far From Home. I'm going to say Homecoming right now is just a slight tick above Far From Home. But I need to see Far From Home again to see. I still think they're right in line. The two Marvel Sony movies that they've been able to make with Tom Holland are the pinnacle for me in terms of live-action Spider-Man movies. And I'm not ready to necessarily say that one is better than the other. I'm just really glad that we have both of them. And I think that they're a fantastic continuation for where this character should be in the live-action universe. And if you love Homecoming, Far From Home is going to be exactly what you're hoping that it's going to be. So that is our spoiler-free review of Spider-Man Far From Home. Believe me, there are plenty of other things that I want to talk to you guys about. So I do plan to record a spoiler-filled conversation about Spider-Man Far From Home because, as I mentioned at the top of this video, there are a lot of jaw-dropping surprises in this movie. Please go out and see it as soon as possible. You do not want to read about these things on social media. You want to experience them as early as possible. It's not quite Endgame shocking, but from the Spider-Man community, from his little corner of the MCU, there are some big things that happen, and I know fans are going to love it. So we'll be back here doing a spoiler-filled conversation after the release of the movie, when more people have had a chance to go see it. You don't want to miss that conversation when it drops, so go down, hit subscribe, turn on your notifications, and every time that we post a really cool Spider-Man video like this here on CinemaBlend's YouTube page, you guys will know about it instantly.
I don't think Tony would have done what he did if he didn't know that you were going to be here after he was gone.
We have one mission. Kill it. And you're coming with us.
Mr. Fury, this all seems like big time. You know, huge superhero kind of stuff. And, I mean, I'm just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, sir.
Please, you've been to space.